Counter-Strike is notorious for adding and removing different features, and the same questions come up all the time. Should I buy the Armory Pass case now or wait for the new one? This other case has just been announced to be removed. Should I buy it now or wait out the hype? This type of investing can be really tricky if you aren't used to it, but there are some very consistent patterns that you can follow for easy profit, and I've been doing these for some time, and they have a pretty quick turnaround to profit. Starting out, we need to lay out some ground rules. So there's a few traps that CS investors always fall into. You can call these the 3 Horsemen of the CS-Pocalypse. Of course, none of these apply to you because you're watching this video, which already puts you on the Mount Olympus of CS investing. Firstly, CS investors are very impulsive. The CS investors will generally act before they think. Any changes in price or any new patches can have catastrophic changes to the CS market, and this will be demonstrated at length in the rest of this video. CS investors are also liquidity locked. All items traded or bought on the CS market are trade locked for 7 days, meaning the fastest possible flip is 7 days. You should never buy something knowing the price will go up tomorrow. You should buy knowing the price will go up in 7 days. And lastly, the CS investor market is novelty craving. CS investors will pay significantly more for something that has just been released, not because it holds more value, but because it's new. With this in mind, let's look at the different ways the game has changed and how you can profit from the patch notes. The simplest form of change is when items are added to Counter-Strike. The most obvious form of item additions would be new cases and skins, but it also includes new armory collections and the Genesis terminals as well. What all these items have in common is they are added but not purchasable directly. For item additions, we won't be looking at anything that's purchasable from Steam or in the CS game store because there's little to no reason for a buyer to ever buy from you with a markup. We will, however, later be looking at CS store items because you can make money off of these as they're removed, but that's later in the video. So you've saved up your armory stars and you're ready to pull in that brand new collection, or you've just got the new case. What do? Do you sell it as soon as possible, or will there be a massive dump of cases dropping the price? Should you wait out the supply? For this, we're going to look at the statistics and market history of items as they're added to the game, but don't forget, cases from the weekly drop are tradable day 1, whereas items from the Armory Pass are tradable day 7, so what exact day after release we're looking at will depend on the item. But for the most part, we're just going to look at it as from when they were tradable. So let's look at some examples. Let's look at the Chrome Dome sticker, which was recently released in the Armory Pass. The price was set much too low compared to the initial demand. It then got corrected to meet that initial demand, and then eventually corrects down to the inflated price before dropping to the normal price. For the Fever case, the initial price was set too high, that then dropped to meet the demand, the market responded, and it reached the inflated level before slowly dropping to the regular price. The Genesis terminal is an extreme example of this first stage. The price was set much too high to meet the demand. This dropped immediately to meet the inflated demand and then dropped to the normal price. And now looking at a traditional case, the price was initially set too high, but not too high. It dropped to meet the inflated demand and then reached the regular price. So as we look at the graphs, there's 3 clear stages for every item's release. The first batch of items become tradable and the market is set at a price, which is set arbitrarily. This is because there's no real indication of what these should be priced at, and this is especially true when it comes to the Genesis terminal. We never had one of these before. The important note is that this price will almost always be too high or too low compared to the demand. The second stage is that the market corrects the price to an inflated level. This is due to demand being higher now than it will be in the coming days due to the novelty of the item. The third stage is that the market corrects to the appropriate level to match the supply and demand as the novelty wears off. So what can we learn from this, and how can we profit from new items being added to Counter-Strike? Well, with new items, the best time to sell is always yesterday. The first day items are tradable. This is usually the best time to sell, which slowly drops until 1 week after the tradability. Do not ever buy these new items from the market between the first and second week of tradability, because you'll be selling on week 2 to 3 where the profits are the lowest. In every example showed so far, and every example I could find, an investor buying the first week would lose. The money is in the hype and the hype goes away. We can also learn that there is money to be made in shorting your own holdings. Let's say you pull 5 Chrome Domes the day that they come out. You want to hold them for 5 years, but what do? Well, in most cases, you're better to sell your items day 1 and buy them back week 2 to 3, but you can get more items for the same price. Sell it in the hype and buy it back when people are bored. This also applies to the Armory Pass. If you can get the new item day 1 to 2, sell it on day 7 and 8, you're in the clear. There's likely some money to be made, but past that, it's risky. Do your very best to make the most of this tiny window. When an item gets added, sell as soon as possible, and if you need to, you can buy it back in the coming weeks. And you might be asking yourself, well, if the price is immediately corrected to match demand properly, isn't there a chance the price would go up on day 2 to 3? Yes, there is, but this is almost never worth it. You're basically putting your increased price at a 50-50. Overall, item additions are pretty consistent, and now we know how to profit from them. But what do we do when items are removed or cases are moved from the normal drop pool to the rare drop pool? How do we make money from that? Well, item removals actually follow quite a similar pattern to item additions, but they have a few distinct differences. We're going to look at the item removals for the Austin capsules, these are purchased from the CS item store, the character craft stickers, which are from the Armory Pass, and the fracture case, which was recently moved from the normal drop to the rare drop pool, which is essentially a removal as far as cases go. The first thing that happens is that Valve will announce that the item is or will soon be removed, causing a massive spike in price. This is true of every example I could find, and this is the panic setting in of people afraid to miss out. We can profit a lot by selling to these panicked buyers. And we don't need to worry about missing out ourselves because in every example I can find, the panic goes away and the items are purchasable for a reasonable price. When the panic wears off, like it always does, there's a drop in the market, and this happens to both items that can be generated and items that can't be generated, but the reason depends. If the item can be generated, like from the Armory Pass, there'll be a huge focus on creating these items, which causes what's called a supply shock. For example, with the character craft stickers, all of the Armory Pass users now started to farm these because they saw that they were getting removed. Unfortunately, the other people that were farming them were the bot farms, which generate Armory stars. But when everyone farms the same item, the supply increases drastically and beats the demand out. We don't see a drop in price for 7 days due to the tray ban, but once they're available, we do see a drop. If the item can't be generated, like the Kilowatt case, we can also see a drop from people trying to flip. For example, when the fracture case was announced to be moved to the rare drop pool, there was a large amount of investors who wanted to quickly move their asset allocation to hold more fracture cases, but many of these investors were looking for short-term flips, wanting to get in and out, making money from the removal announcement, but not the long-term holding of the case. Once this happens, the price will generally flatten off, which means this is the time where you want to be buying and selling. There really shouldn't be a lot of volatility in this unless there's some sudden announcement. One thing I really want to stress, and this is very important, is the money is made from the announcement of the removal, not the removal of the item. You sell when it's announced, not when it's removed, because that's when the panic is. We're not looking to make money from the removal, we're looking to make money from the panic. This means just like with item additions, if you really want to, you can sell initially on the panic spike and rebuy your own holdings, which is essentially a short position. Not quite, but it fits the purpose. So let's lay out some very specific ways to make money. If you're wanting to make money from item removals, here's what you should do. If you've bought the items and the items are tradable, you can make money by selling in the initial panic. This is as soon as possible, and this is similar to item additions. Most investors should sell quickly here. After you've sold your initial holdings, there's two options. If the item is still available to be generated, you could farm the item through the Armory Pass or the in-game means and sell it at the inflated price. But there very well may be a dip because if you can farm it, other people can too, so just be careful. If the item is no longer available in-game, then you're likely too late. If you can't get these items like the fracture case and the Austin, then there really isn't much money for you to be made. From the very start, we knew the M4A1S Solitude was going to be removed. This was no surprise. The removal was priced into the skin. So the more sudden the removal of an item, the more panic there is, and the more panic, the higher the price. Sell early, don't buy right away, and if you're wanting to hold, you can reasonably sell and rebuy later. So you might be thinking, Nath, it's so easy. As soon as an item is announced to be removed or added or whatever, just sell it as soon as I possibly can. There's one patch note in particular that this definitely does not apply to, and that's item changes. If item additions are driven by novelty and item removals are driven by panic, item changes are driven by I don't even know, it's ridiculous. And you know this well if you've been playing in 2025, particularly in October when we saw the massive item crash of October. But this really couldn't portray this any better for us. This was essentially a market flatline and resuscitation, which led to massive losses on golds, which quickly returned to normal prices. This crash was due to two things. One is that the holders of the golds felt that their collections were going to drop in value and wanted to get out. I'm now realizing that gold holders is incredibly hard to say, but the second reason is that the gold holders felt that the skin market in general was not something that they wanted to be in at least as much as they were before. They felt unconfident in the market and they pulled their skins out. But either way, the amount of panic selling on that day was ridiculous. Let's look at a random knife, for example, the Bowie Gamma Doppler. This went from 2 to 5 knives sold per day to 40 sold per day on the day of the trade-up announcement. And if you've seen anything about the stock market, you know that selling of anything like that causes a massive crash immediately. But I pose a question. Most of this crashing happened on day 1 to 2. If the items are changed so that you can trade reds to golds, what is the first day that items tangibly affect the CS market? And the answer is not the day of announcement, to 8 days after the announcement. So why did the market crash on day 1 when all of these new knives flooded the market? But as we talked about at the start of the video, CS investors are very impulsive. Speculative positioning, where a market is set based on the speculation of the investors, not the fundamental pricing of the amount of items in the market. So what can we learn from item changes when Valve changes the way our items work? Volatility. When an update like this comes out, which fundamentally changes the way that the items work, we don't know how things will work. Yeah, you could sell initially and avoid a massive skyrocket. My pick is just sit it out and wait to see. Unless there's a very, very guaranteed way that we know how these items are going to work, just sit it out.